Yes.
So I'm going to turn first to CBLA 5010_183. This, when it comes up on the screen, is a report dated the 2nd of October. We can see that at the bottom of the page. 2nd of October 1984, BPL internal report. And if we go back up to the top of the page, we can see it's prepared by Snape, Dr. Snape. It's in relation to batch HL3186. It's a report from Dr. D. Smith of Wessex by telephone on the 2nd of October, received by Dr. Snape. And we can see the distribution list of this report. Dr. Lane, includes Dr. Lane and Dr. Smith. And it says that a donor was admitted to Bournemouth Hospital with skin rash consistent with Kaposi's sarcoma, leukopenia and anemia. Biopsy results awaited. Donor admits to homosexual activity, but was VDRL negative when he donated blood several days ago. This donation was separated at Wessex RTC, but plasma was not dispatched to BPL. And then it sets out the plasma donation number and when it was collected, 27th of March 1984, dispatched to BPL on 6th of April, and the pack was used in the manufacture of batch HL3186. And then it notes that no factor 9 was recovered from the cryosupernatant, no fraction 2 was recovered from the A plus I precipitate, fraction 5 was recovered and is presently held as L938 and L939, and factor 8 batch HL3186 has been distributed. On the 10th of August, 485 vials were sent to Wessex, and on the 15th of August, 400 vials were sent to Cardiff. And there's some handwriting there, which relates to the recovery of those vials, but we will look at that same information appears on documents we will look at in a little while. And then it goes on to set out what the actions were. Dr. Smith from Wessex was informed of the implication of HL3186 by the telephone on the 2nd of October and was asked to recall all vials, including any held by patients for home therapy. And Dr. Napier from Cardiff was unavailable, but Mr. Booth, the senior MLSO from Cardiff, was informed on the following day, the 3rd of October, by Dr. Snape, and was asked to recall all vials of HL3186, including home therapy issues. And both telephone conversations were copied in writing. And then the factor 5 concentrate was secured and labelled held. And then if we turn over the page, number 4, paragraph 4, Dr. Smith was asked to report any plasma from this donor dispatched to BPL or PFL within the last 5 years. And it notes that blood given by this donor on the 7th of September 83 and the 21st of November 82 was not used to supply plasma to BPL. And Dr. Smith was also asked to determine whether the donor had a history of attendance at local special clinics for venereal diseases. Dr. Tedder was consulted but indicated he did not wish at the moment to receive samples of plasma fractions since he did not feel test methods presently in use were appropriate. He did, however, ask to receive a sample from the most recent donation, and this was arranged. And Dr. Krusk in Manchester was consulted and asked to be supplied with a list of haemophilia centres supplied with HL3186 in order to initiate follow-up studies on patients treated with the batch. Dr. Snape to comply once data is received from Wessex and Cardiff and given the confirmation of the donor's condition. The Medicines Division was informed of the situation by Dr. Fowler, and Dr. Snape would supply a copy of the summary report for the director. And then a late telephone note from Dr. Barnes in Wessex, and so you'll recall Dr. Barnes as the deputy director from Wessex. The donation taken on the 21st of November 82 was taken at Leeds, and time expired plasma from this donation was sent to BPL on the 11th of January 83, and information on this is to be appended by SH. So that was the situation on the 2nd of October 1982. We can see then if we move then to DHSC 302247_090, we see a letter dated the 4th of October 1984, marked confidential, from the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre, sent, we'll see at the bottom, from Dr. Barnes, the Deputy Medical Director. And so we understand that Dr. Smith was in fact on holiday at this stage. It's sent to the consultant haematologist in charge of haemophilia centres, and then the haemophilia centres in the Wessex area are set out there. And it's headed BPL Factor 8, batch number HL3186, and refers to Mr. Allison's telephone calls to their blood bank chiefs yesterday, so that would have been the 3rd of October, asking for the above quoted batch of Factor 8 to be recalled and returned to us. And then it says the reason for this is one of the donors whose plasma was incorporated into this pool is now thought to be suffering from AIDS. Investigations are being carried out and the diagnosis should be settled one way or the other within the next week or two. In the meantime, may I confirm the request to recall all the batches to the centre? And then he says this: in order to prevent undue worry to your patients, may I ask for your discretion here, and for the time being at least, to keep this news to yourself. When any definite information does become available, either Dr. Smith or myself will let you know. Also on the 4th of October, could we look at CBLA 5010_209, which is a letter again from Dr. Barnes, this time to Dr. Snape, BPL, and he sets out the background to the events, and he sets out what's known about the previous donations. If we could go down the page, please. We can see one from the 21st of November 1982 taken in Leeds, time expired plasma pooled and sent to BPL. One from the 7th of September 83 in Bournemouth, sent to a Portsmouth hospital and not returned, and we'll see what happens to that in due course. 27th of March 1984 in Bournemouth, fresh frozen plasma sent to BPL. 6th of April 1983, plasma reduced blood sent to one of our Portsmouth hospitals and not returned. And 25th of September 1984, Bournemouth, plasma separated and frozen, red cells destroyed, and an aliquot has been sent to Dr. Richard Tedder. And then it says, in relation to donations 2 and 3, we are not getting in touch with the clinicians involved until the diagnosis is confirmed. And then if we go over the page, we can see that there's also a possibility of a donation before November 1982 in this region, which we are attempting to trace. I will, of course, contact you when definitive information is available. And we'll look at this letter later, but I'll give the reference for the transcript now. DHSC 0001690 is a letter from the 5th of November 1984, which makes it clear that they haven't found any previous donations before 1982. Now, information about the donor's diagnosis came on the 16th of October 1984, so some days later, and we see this at DHSC 40247_093. DHSC 302247. 2247_093. And we can see that this is, again, a letter from Dr. Barnes, 16th of October, to all directors of haemophilia centres in Wessex. And he says, with reference to the earlier letter we looked at, 4th of October, and his telephone call of yesterday, my apologies to those I could not contact personally, I'm extremely sorry to have to tell you that the diagnosis of AIDS has now been confirmed. I understand that Dr. Snape will be writing to all of us within the next day or two, and that further contact will be made by Dr. Krusk on the follow-up of your patients. In the meantime, I have been asked to suggest that a policy of discreet surveillance be pursued. And we can see there the list of the Haemophilia Centre directors to whom this was sent. So it's not entirely clear what Dr. Barnes is suggesting there by a policy of discreet surveillance. Now, on the same day, a letter was written to the Surgeon Commander of the Royal Naval Hospital in Haslar. If we can look at that, please. It's DHSC 302247_094. And this relates to the one of the donations that we saw in the earlier letter, where it was said that the clinicians were not being informed about this incident until more information was known. So this is taking up. This is the letter informing the Surgeon Commander about the donation. To confirm my telephone call of yesterday, I regret to inform you that a blood donation taken from a donor now known to be suffering from AIDS was sent to RN Hospital Haslar earlier this year, was not returned to us, and presumably has been transfused into a patient. And then the details are set out. And then he is informed that Dr. Tedder is aware of the situation and pleased to carry out virological studies of the patient, and that Dr. Krusk is carrying out follow-up of patients who have received plasma or factor VIII from the donation, and is very willing to offer advice. So that is the information that we have in relation to what the dissemination of information about the incident to clinicians in the immediate aftermath. Turning then to what the action that's taken in relation to recall of the product. Can we turn please to CBLA 5010_211? This is a letter of the 8th of October 1984, again from Dr. Barnes to Dr. Snape, and he says that he confirms an earlier telephone call and the number of vials of factor VIII batch HL3186 sent to the Haemophilia Centre in Wessex, and sets out there the Haemophilia Centre that have received batches and the number that have been returned. So you'll see, for example, that 70 were sent to Salisbury. They've had none returned. 22 to Lord Mayor Trelaw College. 200 sent to them. 33 returned, and so on. So out of the 485...
Sorry, 22 to Lord Mayor Trelaw College?
Sorry, 200 sent to Lord Mayor Trelaw, with 33 returned.
Yeah.
Out of the 485 vials sent, they've had, by 8th of October, 99 returned. We move then on to the 23rd of October, DHSC 301111. This is a memo, a report. We go over to the second page, please. A summary, another report from Dr. Snape, and we can see from the bottom that this is dated the 23rd of October 1984, and he sets out the history and so on. Can we turn, please, to page 4 of this report? We can see there the results of the factor VIII recall. So this is 23rd of October 1984. 400 vials of batch HL3186 dispatched to Cardiff break down with recovered 101 out of 150 vials for Heath Park, Cardiff, 51 out of 60 for Morriston, and Carmarthen 36 out of 40. And altogether, they know that 9 patients have been treated with the product in Cardiff. So a total of 338 vials were recovered, with 9 patients receiving the batch, and that's the situation in Cardiff. In Wessex, there's no information given about how many patients have been treated, but they know that out of the 485 vials, 187 had been recovered by that time. So 105 out of 200 from Lord Mayor Treloar. By now, they know that Salisbury and Winchester had used all the vials that they had been sent, but Bournemouth had returned, for example, 60 out of the 60 that they had been sent. If we can then turn, please, over the page to page 5 of this report, it's worth noting what Dr. Snape is saying on the 23rd of October about the observations on the incident. He makes 2 observations. At 5.2, he says this: in this particular instance, the last and most damaging donation was received at BPL on 6th of April 1984, pooled for fractionation on 17th of May 1984 and issued for clinical use on 10th of August 1984. This timetable is consistent with the 5-week period of quarantine presently supportable for fresh frozen plasma and the irreducible 6 to 8 week delay from pooling plasma to release of factor VIII concentrate for clinical use. Enforcement of a 3-month quarantine period would not in this instance have avoided the loss of resource resulting from the plasma pool being compromised by a single donation. It would almost certainly have avoided patient exposure to the product, however. Enforcement of a 6-month quarantine period would have prevented release of the batch for clinical use. It would also have allowed the donation to be excluded before pooling, thus avoiding a very expensive reject situation. This incident must be extremely cogent argument for the establishment of cold storage facilities capable of supporting a 6-month quarantine of fresh frozen plasma. And he also makes this observation in relation to the follow-up. The appearance of this donor at 3 different centres within 2 years clearly underlines a fundamental problem when carrying out follow-up of donor incidents of this sort. Surely central coordination of donor records is unavoidable. Now, a copy of this report was sent to the DHSS on the 24th of October 84. We don't need to go to that, but for the transcript, that's PRSE 301658. Can we though turn to CBLA 5010_188, which is a document that deals with the follow-up undertaken by Dr. Krusk of those who were treated with the infected donations. So we have here the front cover, and we can see it's in relation to batch HL3186, and it's Dr. Krusk's letter to Haemophilia Centre directors dated the 20th of November 1984. And we can see the list of Haemophilia Centre directors that it's sent to. So those in Wales, and so we've got Swansea there, Carmarthen, Cardiff, as well as those in the Wessex area. It's CC'd to a number of different individuals, including Dr. Ritzer, Dr. Lane, Dr. Snape, Dr. Smith, and the Wessex Regional Health Authority. If we turn then to the page 2, we can see the letter itself. And it says in the second paragraph down, I have responsibility for the epidemiological follow-up of recipients of this batch to confirm whether any hazard exists and to assist in the investigation of patients where required. I hope that we can obtain the maximum information from this unfortunate incident and devise methods for the prevention of the disease. We also need to confirm the association of HTLV3 infection and transfusion of factor VIII concentrates. And then he, under risk to the patients, he says this: from the foregoing discussion, you will see that it is difficult to be certain of the precise risk of any recipient contracting AIDS, but the following facts may help you to appreciate the position. And then he sets out on the following page 6 facts. Only a proportion of the patients transfused with an infected batch are likely to contract HTLV3. Some patients who have received commercial factor VIII since January January 1st, 1980 will already have contracted HTLV3 infection from other infected batches. The proportion of patients who are infected with HTLV3 who eventually contract AIDS is unknown. 4, the long-term prognosis for patients with HTLV3 infection is unknown. 5, there is evidence that HTLV3 infections can be transmitted by sexual contact. Therefore, some sexual partners of recipients of factor VIII contaminated with HTLV3 may now be at risk. And 6, we cannot yet distinguish those patients who are likely to transmit infection and who are likely to contract AIDS by means of laboratory tests. And then he says this under methods of investigation. With the above facts in mind, I propose the following strategy. First of all, A, identify all patients who have received factor VIII batch HL3186. B, follow up patients. Patients identified should be followed up at least at 4 monthly intervals for 6 years. And then he sets out details of how that should be achieved. And if we go over the page, please, he also provides them with simplified record forms for the follow-up to be provided to him. It says halfway down that page, follow-up should be carried out even if a patient is found to be positive HTLV3 antibody in the first specimen test, i.e. Prior to receipt of the infected batch. He then sets out that 4 monthly review and how that should be completed, and that the forms should be sent to him in Manchester. And he says this, the follow-up may be carried out using an alternative of 2 different strategies. 1, if the patient has been informed of the risk associated with this contaminated batch of factor VIII testing, factor VIII testing could be carried out on each specimen as it is obtained at each 4 monthly review. In addition, it would be wise to warn the index patient that his spouse may be at risk from contracting HTLV3 infection as a result of any sexual contact, and a test for HTLV3 antibodies can be offered, says, to directors at the time of follow-up of the index case. Follow-up can be arranged by the director or in collaboration with the GP as thought necessary. So that's for those cohorts of patients who have been informed of the risk associated with the contaminated batch. And then on the following page, he sets out an alternative strategy. An alternative strategy would be not to tell the patient of the risk involved, but to observe him at regular clinical review 4 monthly, to collect serum specimens for HTLV3 antibody examination and send them to me at Manchester. These would not be examined until 2 years after the initial exposure, or until the patient develops clinical features suggestive of AIDS or testing is required by the Haemophilia Centre director. And then it says, the next paragraph, the ethical problems involved in these 2 alternative methods of follow-up are discussed in an appendix at the end of this letter. And if we turn to page 6, we can see that appendix. Ethical problems associated with HTLV3 infection in haemophiliacs. 1, informing the patient and his family of the risks, and he sets out the benefits of this. It allows information of the development of HTLV3 infection to be available to the caring physician as soon as possible, and thereby to identify and treat all complications as they arise, where treatment is available. It also allows the patient's spouse to be informed of the risk and to take precautions. And it also maintains a trusting relationship between the physician and his patient, which is essential if difficult problems arising from HTLV3 infection are to be surmounted. And then the alternative, which is entitled restricted follow-up. In this strategy, the identification of patients who contracted HTLV3 infection will not be made for 2 years or at the request of the centre director. It will be impossible to warn spouses and advise preventative measures to limit the risk of transmission of infection, since it will not be known when the index patient first contracts HTLV3 infection. If a patient develops AIDS-related illness, it will be too late, as the period of maximum infectivity will already have passed. Any benefit of peace of mind for the patient will be temporary if any other person exposed develops AIDS. If the patient finds out that he has had this batch, then the trust of the patient will be lost and the Haemophilia Centre director placed in a delicate situation. and it is quite likely that any patient who has received commercial factor VIII since 1980 and thus had already possibly been exposed to HTLV-3 infection will not have a greatly increased chance of contracting AIDS compared with the patient who has received only NHS concentrate until now. And then he says, in my view, option 1 is the only one tenable on moral and ethical grounds. So then if we turn back to page 5, should the patient be told? Ideally, I think he should, but this will depend on many factors, including the amount of anxiety concerning AIDS there is already present at the centre and the degree to which the patient is capable of understanding the situation. Every effort should be made to encourage the patient to discuss the problem with his spouse and help them to face the problem together. The general practitioner should also be informed by letter. And then other preventative measures, once a patient is told of the risk to exposure of HTLV-3 infection, he should also be warned that his sexual partner might also be exposed to infection, and then it goes on to discuss barrier methods of contraception. So that is the letter that was sent in November 1984 to all the haemophilia centre directors. We don't have very much information about how that was received, save for a couple of documents I can take you to. Can we turn please to, in fact, before I do that, I'll just take you to HHFT 301026_004. So this is a letter dated the 20th of November 1984, so a few days, the same day as the Krusk letter we've just looked at. It's a letter from the Wessex Regional Health Authority, and we can see at the bottom the circulation is to those haemophilia centre directors who have received the Krusk letter. It's a letter from the regional medical officer, and it says, "Dear Doctor," first of all, it sets out on that first paragraph the background to the contamination incident. Second paragraph relates to the working party being set up by the DHSS to look at the questions raised for the blood transfusion service by the recognition of AIDS. And it's the third paragraph that's of particular relevance. I have discussed the subject of AIDS with 2 members of the working party and feel that in the first instance it would be strongly advisable for the patients who received batch number HL3186 of factor VIII concentrate or their parents to be told, with the emphasis that the benefits of treatment by factor VIII far outweigh the small risk of the patient developing AIDS. I hope you will agree to do this now and let me know thereafter. And then he goes on to say, the public interest in this matter will almost certainly lead to further press inquiries in Wessex before long. I would like to be able to say that all patients have been informed and that the situation is being closely monitored. So turning then to the material that we have to understand how this was received and what the haemophilia centre directors actually did in terms of telling patients, can we turn to CBLA 5010196? Now, this is a letter written from CBLA 5010_196. This is a letter written from Dr. Green from Portsmouth Haemophilia Centre to Dr. Snape, and it's in response to a letter written by Dr. Snape to the Haemophilia Centre directors, prompting them to provide information about follow-up to Dr. Krusk. And Dr. Green says this: I object to the tone of your letter. I intend to follow up the patients affected by the transfusion of HL3186, and I reserve the right to do this in my own time and in my own way. If you had taken the trouble to inquire from Dr. Krusk, you would know that he is in possession of samples from some of my patients, and in due time he will be in receipt of samples from all of them. And then he complains it's taken Dr. Krusk 7 weeks to supply him with results of the tests he does, presumably you should say have, and I only got them by phoning him. Things, I dare say, will work out in their own time. So this doesn't help us very much with understanding whether or not Dr. Green has put his patients in the first or second category, i.e. told them about what's happened, told them about what's happened, other than that he has asked Dr. Krusk to test these samples that he sent him, which would suggest that those patients at least should have been told. But it certainly gives the impression that there isn't much urgency in terms of the time that seems to be taken, both by Dr. Green and possibly by Dr. Krusk, in understanding whether or not these patients have in fact been infected with HTLV3. In August 1988, Dr. Lane wrote to Dr. Krusk. We don't need to go to it, but it's for the transcript. It's CBLA 5010_200. Wrote to Dr. Lane asking him whether a final report had ever been written by Dr. Krusk, resulting from the follow-up that he had undertaken of those patients who had been received the infected products. We can look at Dr. Krusk's response. That's CBLA 5010_202. It's a response dated the 23rd of September 1988, and he says this at paragraph 2. The follow-up we were doing 18 months ago of this incident was bedevilled at that time by the reluctance of haemophilia centre directors to cause what they considered to be an unnecessary worry to their patients, so that a follow-up of the recipients who received this product had not been carried out in the formal sense. And then he says at the fourth paragraph down, your letter prompts me to reopen this inquiry, as we do need to know the outcome of patients who received this and other batches which may have been contaminated with HIV. I will consult my files and let you have a report as to what is known at the present time. So Dr. Krusk's analysis of the response from haemophilia centre directors is that they did not want to cause unnecessary worry to their patients, suggesting perhaps that in fact patients weren't told that they had received a contaminated product.
Well, it looks as though, on the face of it, they've adopted the first of the was it the first or the second of the two options?
Second.
The second of the two options which Grass put out in his letter.
Well, sir...
And they've adopted the course which he regarded as morally and ethically unacceptable.
Well, sir, it may be that they haven't even gone that far, because that second option did include follow-up in a formal sense. It did include taking samples and sending them to Dr. Krusk. It looks from this as if they haven't even gone down that route. They simply haven't done any follow-up. It may be, well, so you'll have to decide, but it may be that Dr. Krusk here is saying he hasn't actually had many samples at all.
Yes.
Even ones that he can't test for the 2 years or until some other event happens. Now, Dr. Krusk there suggests that he will do a final report, but the inquiry has not found a final report from Dr. Krusk. So, lastly, then, what does the inquiry? What do we know about what happened to the patients? Can we turn, please, to DHSC? 3 zeros 4180_050. So this is a report that's neither dated nor authored, but it does give us some more information about the incident in itself and about what happened to the patients, albeit we don't know where it comes from. We don't know who wrote it, I should say. So it sets out the background to the donor becoming ill, in the first paragraph, and second paragraph sets out what was found and that the diagnosis of AIDS was confirmed, sets out the donation history and his blood group. 21st of November 1982, Leeds, BTC, red cells unused, time expired plasma sent to BPL, 2 batches of PPF were made and held. And then 14 February 1983, Birmingham, whole blood donation transfused, further information from Dr. Allah, and we don't, I think, have any further information in relation to that. 26th of August, 10th of February 1984, Wessex BTC, all regular donors sent AIDS leaflets. An AIDS leaflet was received by the donor early in 84. 7th of September 83, Wessex BTC, whole blood transfused to Mr. SR following prostatectomy for benign hyperplasia. Later, anti-HTLV3 found in serum. Patient later died from neoplasm of rectum. And then over the page, 27th of March 84, Wessex BTC, plasma-reduced red cells transfused 2nd of April 84 to patient for bleeding peptic ulcer. Follow-up detected in his anti-HTLV3 detected in his serum early November 1984, and that we can see is the Royal Naval Hospital in Haslar. And then it goes on to discuss the HL3186 factor 8 batch, 7,000 plasma donations in the pool, 9 patients transfused in Wales and 29 in Wessex. Other units immediately recalled. Total batch comprised 485 vials sent to Wessex and 400 to Cardiff. A total of 338 vials were recovered from Cardiff and 9 patients received the batch. In Wessex, a total of 187 vials were recovered and 29 patients received the batch. And then they set out below the breakdown of where those 29 patients in Wessex were treated. And we can see that 8 of those were in Lord Mayor Trelaw and 8 of those were in Southampton, with Dorchester, Salisbury and Portsmouth also, and Winchester also having patients. And then if we go over the page, we see 25th of September 84, Wessex, informed by hospital that donor has AIDS, donation tested and found HTL3 positive by Dr. Tedder, and the donation was discarded. And then we see that the donor died on the 5th of November 1984. So that gives us a little bit more information. We also have a few other bits of correspondence. So we can see from a letter written from the Southampton Haemophilia Centre to Dr. Snape, 29th of January 1985, CBLA 5010_194. We have a letter saying, "Dear Dr. Snape, thank you for your letter regarding follow-up of patients treated with factor 8, batch HL3186. All 8 patients exposed to this batch at Southampton have been informed of the problem, and sera from 7 of these patients have been sent to Dr. John Krusk, and 1 of those patients has been followed up at Lord Mayor Trelaw." So that's a letter from Dr. Bell, 29th of January 1985. Now, we know from another letter written by Dr. Bell to Dr. Arenstram, which we don't need to go to, but it's TREL 40110_040, that one of those infected from Southampton was Gary Bennett, who has given evidence to this inquiry. And so I think it's helpful to remind ourselves of what he told this inquiry in his written statement about being informed about the contaminated product. We find his written statement at INQY 40325. Sorry, it's the wrong it's the wrong. I've given you the wrong account. WITN. Don't know why. WITN 0297001. Thank you. Right. That's the story of. That's the first page of the witness statement. If we could go, please, to page 5. And it starts at page 18. I had to go to classroom 2A. There are about 10 or 11 of us in this particular age band. The nurse and Dr. Wessex came in and said, "Have you all got a pen and paper?" He then told me personally, "If you have such and such a batch number," and he read the numbers out. He said, "You have permission from the headmaster, and I need you all now to use the public phone outside our dormitory's office and ask your parents to check if they have had that batch number at home. Not to use it, but return it to your hospital." That batch number that was read out was at home. We had got it from Southampton General. Dr. Wasif then left the room. I remember getting off the seat, walking down to our dorms, and we were all lined up in a row outside our dormitory to see our dorm master, Mr. Eggins. He knew why we were there. I rang home and learnt that I had one of the batch numbers at home. I spoke to my dad. They didn't tell us why we had to check these batch numbers. It was a long time ago, but looking back, the first part I can actually remember. I left college and went to my hospital to see Dr. Chisholm. She knew my brother and me as we had been seeing her for years. I can remember in 1985 I went to see her and she changed her tune, as I think she knew there was a crisis, as she wasn't laughing anymore. She knew all of us, but her demeanour had changed to a more serious one. I think she knew, and it was as if she was thinking, "You don't realise what has happened." Tony and I learnt at the same time about the batch numbers. Looking back, they had hammered us with bad batches, and then if we go over the page, I remember Mum and Dad sitting me down in the front room and saying, "You've been infected with HIV since 1982. This was around 1986. It came through in a letter to my mum and dad from Southampton General. They received nothing from Trelaw ever. We were told via a letter from the hospital despite going there regularly. They never told us face to face." So you will have to marry up this account of being told or when Gary Bennett was told about the infection with the letter we looked at from Dr. Bell to Dr. Snape of the 29th of January 85, in which he said that all the patients had been told of the problem. So those were the documents that I wanted to draw your attention to in relation to the contaminated product incident. And that brings to a conclusion the presentation on the early years of the Wessex Regional Blood Transfusion Centre.
Thank you. So we take a break now, do we, till 1 o'clock?
Yes, 1 o'clock, and Dr. Lloyd will give evidence at 1 o'clock.
And we start at 1 o'clock because Dr. Lloyd is joining us from Canada, and they are 5 hours behind us.
Yes.
Very well. So 1 o'clock for Dr. Lloyd. We'll take, those of us who want a lunch break now can have it now.